I think if we kick off,
Yeah.
the first question was what? What was the first question?
What is dyslexia?
What is dyslexia?
When I do my workshops, that's the first question I put up on the board. What is dyslexia?
Right.
And everyone's got a different idea of what it's about. Obviously, people go reading, spelling, writing is the main thing. You could take it further back than that, because I think it was Bedford and Luton were the first people to take out, for our overseas listeners, by the way, that Bedford and Luton is a local authority, a kind of a county sort of in England. Bedford and Luton took dyslexia out of all their special educational needs paperwork and changed it to SLD.
Yes.
Do you remember? Yeah? And that meant specific learning differences, difficulties or diversities. And that meant that dyslexia wasn't a real thing.
Right.
And then, so that meant that they couldn't fund it. Quite clever, really, isn't it? So that was what happened. Now, that happened for 7 years. Now, this is the interesting bit. For 7 years. 7 years, by the way, is how long children are in school. Yeah, in secondary school. And so what they found was, this went on for 7 years, and then all of a sudden they had these massive plummet in results because they weren't addressing dyslexia. So in the question, what is dyslexia? It's an SLD,
yes,
specific learning difficulty, which it kind of is, but it needs a name in order to be funded. And it's reading, spelling and writing. Do you want to put a bit in, or do you want me to carry on?
Carry on, I will chip in a minute, yeah.
Reading, spelling and writing. It's the most common neurological disorder. Something in the region of about 10% of the population is dyslexic. However, most of them won't know.
Yeah.
So we've got 3% are severely dyslexic and will know, and 7% will just go, oh, I've always struggled with a bit of reading and writing, and you know, just kind of, we all know people like that. They go, oh yeah, I don't know if I don't want to write that down, you know, you write it down for me, that sort of thing. It is also a neurological disorder. It's also a very comorbid disorder. It is particularly comorbid or coexistence with ADHD. 50% of ADHD people are dyslexic.
Yeah.
I'm not. I should have picked from this list. It's all right.
No, it's all right. We're talking about what is dyslexia.
Yeah,
That's good.
what is dyslexia? And it is predominantly a male condition. It's still predominantly a male condition. Having said that, it is also, many other conditions we're finding that females are presenting differently. So ADHD was predominantly male, but now we're going, it's not. Autism was, now we know it's not. This will probably happen with dyslexia at some point.
And again, because it's on that it's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
It's not just you're this.
Yeah.
It's a spectrum of
Yeah.
difficulties. And when we're talking about an SLD, and then you mentioned the word, it's a neurological condition as well.
Yeah.
That can get confusing.
Yeah.
In terms of, well, if it's a learning difficulty or disability, how is that linking in with a neurological thing? Because and it will come into a question later on in terms of and how dyslexia is perceived as it's given a negative connotation, really, isn't it, as being dyslexic?
Yeah. So it's actually it's a neurological disorder because it's a different type of brain makeup. So dyslexic people favour the right hemisphere of the brain. That's your art, creativity, music, that sort of thing. Where they struggle is the left hemisphere of the brain when you've got math, science, etc. And so that's why it's a neurological disorder,
right. Because
it is different. It's a different type of brain, and it is a lot more tangible than, say, autism or although fMRI, we're talking about fMRI scanning, MRI you'll know of, and there is loads of evidence there, particularly through Yale University. There's loads of evidence there about the right hemisphere of the brain stuff, And what we try to do using neuroplasticity is to get the right hemisphere of the brain doing the functions of the left hemisphere of the brain.
Yeah.
And that's through activities, interventions, using different learning and teaching styles, using multimodal learning, etc., etc., etc. So it is, it's an interesting one,
So-
that's for sure.
Okay, so when we look at this paper that's on here, I've got things on here to talk about. We've mentioned about the reading and writing and that, but you've said in a lot of workshops that we've done in that dyslexia isn't really a reading issue.
No.
It's a phonic issue.
Right. Okay. So, oh gosh, this is when right, we're going to play follow the marbles. So okay, okay. So dyslexia is a Greek word. It means difficulty with words. But actually, dyslexic people do not have a difficulty with words. They have a difficulty with sounds.
Right.
So, one of the things you may remember at school, I certainly do, we're of a similar age. Did you have a little tobacco tin with your cards in at school?
Yeah.
Yeah, little flashcards.
Yeah.
And that's how we used to learn. And now the focus is more on phonics. Now the phonics, okay. So because dyslexia is, because too strong a word, just go with me. Because dyslexia is predominantly male, then we have male brain learning.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have male brain learning, that means visuals.
Yeah.
And the male brain doesn't do auditory verbal, doesn't do sounds, it does visual. And so, therefore, to reach the male brain, you are better using visuals. So when we had our little flashcards at school, all the boys would go cat, dog, whatever, you'd show up all your words, school, bus, and we'd learn the words visually. And so this is not so much the case anymore. And so it's nearly all phonics. Now phonics is sounds, and they don't get the sound thing quite as well. So one of the very first things I say about dyslexia is plenty of visuals. So I would go around a room like this and I would label everything. In fact, no, I wouldn't. I would make a load of labels and let them label everything. Wall, board, cup, table, phone, laptop, heater, all these different things, and have them label, because then they're passively taking that stuff in all the time. And so that's my first port of call. As we get later on through their learning, actually, having said that, I was in a secondary school in Oxford, and they got all this going, which you don't often see that in secondary schools. I remember saying to the head, "This is fantastic, this is exactly what you need. How have you got away with it?" He said, "Because it's always been there."
All right.
Because older kids don't often like that sort of stuff. As they get older, you want things like technical vocabulary, So if you're studying, I don't know, a particular science, you'd want all the different science vocabulary, somewhere where you can see it, and somewhere where you can. So yeah, absolutely. It's so dyslexic people do not have difficulty with words, but they do have difficulty with sounds. So the name dyslexia is not actually fit for purpose.
Yeah.
So there you go.